Hello, I'm David Hines. Welcome to another edition of Hinds'Sight. Today we want to talk about cricket, in particular West Indies cricket. Recently, West Indies cricket was plunged into some sort of crisis. The West Indies players who went on a tour to India walked off the tour because there was a disagreement with their union, the West Indies Players Association. The players contended that an agreement that was reached between their union and the West Indies Cricket Board to shift some of the monies earned by the players, that is, the test players and international players, to shift some of that money to the players in the West Indies who do not represent the West Indies or do not represent them on a regular basis. That is a kind of redistribution of wealth. The players claim that the agreement that was reached and signed between their union and the board was done behind their backs, and they did not agree with the amount of money that was deducted from their pay to go towards the other first-class cricketers. And so they walked off the tour of India. Well, having done so, what it meant was that they walked off the job. And in the process of doing so, they plunged our cricket and plunged the West Indies into crisis. First of all, the Indian Cricket Board decided that they would charge the West Indies 42 million US dollars to compensate for the players walking off the tour. The West Indies Cricket Board and the management of the cricket team there in India had tried to persuade the players to stay on tour, but they left, led by their captain, the one-day captain, Dwayne Bravo. Well, there are a couple of consequences there. As I mentioned, the players have put the West Indies in debt, $42 million US dollars. If the West Indies Cricket Board were to pay that amount of money, it will certainly make them bankrupt. If the West Indies governments, as some have argued and some have tried to do, to get them to foot the bill, if they were to do so, that would take a big chunk of money out of the national treasuries in the Caribbean. It was a misguided act on the part of the players. They've put the West Indies in debt and forced the West Indies to face sanction from India. India's already said that in addition to claiming $42 million, that they would not be hosting any future tours, certainly not in the near future with the West Indies cricket team. The consequences of this are astronomical. India is the biggest market in the world, and so therefore not to have the opportunity to tour India will have economic consequences for the West Indies cricket team. The players also embarrassed the Caribbean. Never in the history of West Indies cricket have players walked off. There are players who have gone on strike. This very crop of players went on strike in 2009. This is the first time in the history of West Indies cricket that a team has walked off a tour and not take charge of the situation that they went on tour for. So here we are. Some people are arguing that this is a matter of trade unionism. This is a matter of players arguing for better pay. Well, yes and no. It's more no than yes. This is not a matter of wages as far as I'm concerned, because these players are paid very well. These are elite players. You're talking about 35,000 US dollars, I think, for a day of cricket. This is a lot of money. This is a lot of money. And so, therefore, for me, it is not a matter of fighting for fair wages. This is a matter of distribution of wealth, redistribution of wealth. As a Caribbean people, as a Caribbean economy, the question of redistribution of wealth has always been there with us. That is what our ancestors fought for. They fought for a level playing field. They fought for social equality. And that meant redistribution of wealth. And here we have cricketers themselves coming from the working class, sitting on the shoulders of those who have toiled to make them reach where they are. Here they are opposing distribution of wealth. And for me, this is the central issue. Here are players opposing distribution of wealth, redistribution of wealth. Now, I think these players lack a certain kind of social and historical consciousness that really flies in the face of what the West Indies has been in terms of its cricket. Here is a team that came out of colonialism. The West Indies cricket team coming out of colonialism, rising to the top of the world. The smallest cricketing nation, whipping the rest of the world for over a decade and a half, proving that smallness does not necessarily mean lack of ability. Here, I repeat, the smallest cricket nation, both in terms of population, but also the poorest cricketing nation, dominating world cricket from 1980 to 1995, the longest any team has dominated team sports in the history of sports. And so there is a certain level of consciousness that came out of that period. Here were players who recognized their social and political role, that here they were sons and daughters of slaves and indentured servants who, having come out of bondage, were proving to the world that black and brown people and West Indian people are equal to the rest of the world, equal to people all over the world. It was an act of anti-racism. It was an act of anti-classism. It was an act of nationalism, and it was an act of freedom. And these players seem to not to understand that very serious and glorious tradition that their predecessors set. Now, Frank Worrell in 1948 refused to go on a tour because he said he was not paid enough. In the 1970s, the great West Indian team, led by Clive Lloyd, went away and played World Series cricket, the Packer cricket, asking for wages, but never did they walk off a tour. Never did they walk off a tour. Now, nothing is wrong with players trying to get more money. After all, they're workers, and their shelf life is short compared to other workers. By the time you're age 35, your career is over. So you're talking about, 15 years or so in your career. And so the players have to try to earn as much as they can in that short period of time. But one has to separate this individualism, which has become part and parcel of the West Indian society, part and parcel of the present generation. And it is from that generation, from the ranks of the working people, that these cricketers come. So the cricketers are a reflection of this new individualism that has taken hold in the Caribbean in the age of neoliberalism, which came into being at the end of the 1980s. And so there is a certain lack of consciousness on the part of the West Indian cricketers to understand that you have a responsibility to earn your keep, and you have a responsibility to take care of your family, to take care of yourself, but you also have a responsibility for the nation that brought you into being, for the nation that created the conditions so that you could rise at the top and go onto the world stage and represent the West Indies. Now, what has happened? The players have come back, they've been debriefed, they have not said very much apart from the captain. One player, Marlon Samuels, said that he was opposed to ending the tour. We have heard from Darren Sammy, the first class, the 2020 captain and former test and one-day captain. He seems to suggest that he was not in favor of coming off the tour. But none of them has been sanctioned. I do feel that at least the captains should have been sanctioned. At least the captains should have been sanctioned. They should have been sacked. Dwayne Bravo should be sacked from the first class captaincy, Sammy from the 2020 captaincy, and Dennis Ramdin from the test captaincy. But they've reappointed Dennis Ramdin to the captaincy to go to South Africa. This, I think, is a problem. You see, the irony here is that the West Indies Cricket Board cannot sanction the cricketers because they themselves have been guilty of excesses. They've been guilty of incompetence. They've been guilty of a kind of arrogance. They've been guilty of not being firm. In 2009, the cricketers went on strike, and some of them were prevented from playing. The administrators of the time decided that the West Indies cricket team needed to go in a different direction. And they appointed Sammy as captain and brought in some new players. Well, in came the present president of the board, Mr. David Cameron. And what he did immediately was that he suspended, in fact, gotten rid of that new dispensation that was introduced by the old board, and brought back some of these players who have been the problematic players and brought them back and give them leadership positions. And so therefore, there is the situation there where the board does not have the kind of resolve in order that is needed to take the West Indies cricket in another direction. It seems to me that we are marking time. We've been talking for, since 1995? So you're talking almost 20 years since we fell from glory. And we've been talking about turning the corner, about getting back to the days of glory. Unfortunately, after 2 decades, we have not done so. It seems to me, therefore, that we have to mark time and see this generation out. And once the generation leaves, that a new generation comes in with a new consciousness that can take West Indies cricket to another level and back to the place where it was during the period of nationalism and the period of glory. One has to make sure that the new generation of players are given the kind of opportunities, not only to learn the skill of cricket, but to learn the history of cricket and to learn how that history is grounded in the history of the struggle for liberation, the struggle for freedom, the struggle for dignity, and the struggle for nationhood. They must understand that they're individuals, but they are part of a larger collective. They're part of a West Indies civilization, and that cricket is one of the pillars of West Indian civilization, and that they have a responsibility to keep that positive and revolutionary tradition that those who went before them were able to put in place. Until the next time, this is David Hinds thanking you for tuning in to yet another edition of Hinds'Sight. See you next time.